As you know, we're going to be talking about a swimming pool. So we've got a special. Gonna do that one first, and then we'll go into the regular agenda.
Can you speak louder, please?
Oh, boy,
I'm going down.
I'll try.
Thank you.
Where are you? Oh, you're right in front.
I know,
Okay.
on purpose.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:30 PM. Land acknowledgement, we acknowledge that the Nakusp area have a rich indigenous history and acknowledge the Earl Lakes and Ikes people within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. Any introduction of late items?
There are no late items.
Recommendation to the agenda of the February 10th, 2025 special meeting be adopted. Amending, have a motion, please, Councilor. Seconded, Councilor Edwards, any questions? All in favor? Carried. So we will move. Anyone's got any other items they wish to bring forward? Fees and charges amendment, bylaw number 746. Recommendations that the fees and charges amending bylaws number 746, 2025 be adopted as presented. Have a motion, please. Councilor Edwards, seconded Councilor Knorzen. Any questions? All in favor? Oh, opposed? Carried. So. Question from the press or the public on the fees and charges amendment bylaw. Yes,
This question is asked about the fees.
yes, you can stand up. And
Yeah, I will.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Jim Fenton. Never read my address here.
So actually, so Jim, we've already, this isn't, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I only wanted to ask two questions in regards to sewer rates and the water rates. Why there's so much difference between single family dwelling and all the way down to bachelor units, and similar with the water rates.
Okay, thank you.
That's why there's such a difference in prices for each individual, why they're classified differently.
Sure. And I can pass that on to the CAO and he can redirect to.
Mark?
The rates are basically, they're historically set at that, and the idea was based on the usage, so bachelor suite is going to use a lot less water or sewer than a single family dwelling. Typically, bachelor suites are just secondary properties, secondary dwellings on a property, so it wouldn't, if you're just a small house, that's still a single family dwelling. Bachelor suite would just be like a small carriage home or something like that. It gets classified.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm talking about is a single family dwelling pays $589.08 a year for sewer rates. But yet an apartment pays $481. I don't know what a two family residence is. Is that a place with a secondary suite? Yet a mobile home park pays only $436, and a bachelor dwelling unit only pays $319. I just don't understand what the difference in sewer rates for a single family dwelling is more than an apartment per unit. I'm sure the usage is probably very similar. In regards to the water rates, single family dwelling pays $542, but an apartment or a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, the first unit pays $542, but the rest of the units only pay $377. And a mobile home pad only pays $423. I can assume mobile home pads are very similar to a single family dwelling and similar as an apartment or duplex, triplex, fourplex. I just don't understand why we're not all paying the same water rate. The water rate is there to do the maintenance and reserve funding for our water system. Is that not correct? I'm just confused why there's different rates.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. You're not wrong. The sewer and sewer and water rates are there so that we can
That's you? No.
additional revenue to be set aside in reserves. However, in terms of water, one of the things that we're dealing with is, generally speaking, a single family dwelling is going to have a lawn, so there's going to be some outdoor stuff, whereas the apartment buildings, the individual units, they're not going to be watering those different things. Mobile homes tend to have smaller numbers of people living in them, so it's sort of an average that was come up with. And then, of course, also with water, your secondary suite, which would be like on a two-family, like a two-family split or something on a house. Generally speaking, what you'd be running into there is one person is probably the landlord and taking care of the water and the lawn, and the other would be paying less. So it's sort of an average there rate between the two different households. But sewer, that's something that we definitely could look at and see whether it makes sense that everybody be paying equal across the board.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Really appreciate it. Any other questions? Anybody online? Any questions? From the camera, I just brought forward from the camera, and we can adjourn at 6:35 and get a motion. Councilor Edwards, 6:35 p.m. Special council agenda is closed, and we will move into the regular council agenda once I find it again. Right, we are, this is going to be the committee of the whole, so we will move into the call to order at 6:36 p.m. Call the meeting to order. Again, land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Nakusp area have a rich indigenous history and acknowledge the Lakes and Isles people within whose traditional lands we are moving today. Adoption of the agenda, recommendations that the agenda of the February 10th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented, amended. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Knoyson, seconded. Councillor McLaren-Cole. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? There. Adoption of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole. Recommendation, the minutes of the October 28th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented, amended. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Edwards, seconded. Councillor McLaren-Cole. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So, if anyone's not aware of what a committee of the whole is, we sort of relax a lot, and we let people speak, and there'll be. I'll put up some regulations on what I would like to see when we have someone speaking. So we can shut my phone on. So today we have RDCK Emergency Management. Are they online? Yes, they are. So recommendations, the presentation provided by the RDCK on February 10th, 2025 be received information. Can I have a motion, please? Councilor McLaren-Cole, second. Councilor Edwards, and I'm not sure who we have.
We have Dan Sigwin.
Yeah. Okay. Dan?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm kind of used to a formal setting, so I appreciate that you were able to let me know that it wasn't going to be that much of a as formal a setting as a regular board meeting. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm grateful for the invitation to come talk a little bit about emergency management. I'm going to try to, well, do you hear me? Maybe I should.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And I'll go ahead and try to share my screen at this point here. How is that?
Successful.
Successful. How wonderful. Okay, I don't think I can see hands. I'm happy to either like follow whatever process you normally do if you want to ask questions throughout, or if you'd like to wait at the end. I do have a slide when I'm done that says time for questions. So if I haven't met you before, my name is Dan Sigwin. I'm the manager of community sustainability at the Regional District of Central Kootenay, and my world is around disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. And I also am responsible for the emergency management, the Emergency Operations Center, and I often take on the role of EOC director when the EOC is activated. Tonight, I'm hoping to speak a little bit about what emergency management as a whole. I was trying to put a presentation together that looks at, kind of gives you a broad overview of what EM is, at the same time, what that looks like when we're in that legislative place of the Emergency and Disaster Management Act, and how that emergency, or how EDMA, I'll talk about it as EDMA from here on in, looks like when delivered by both the Village of Nakusp and the RDCK in that place of shared responsibility. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I wanted to talk about what emergency management is as a whole. And if I was to try to look at it and encapsulate it in one sentence, emergency management is really that organized response of preparing for, mitigating, responding to, and recovering from disasters with that goal of protecting lives, property, and environment. So when you look at this emergency management, the 4 phases, you get this payoff of like 6-to-1 when you spend more of your time and effort, and consequently sometimes money as well, in that mitigation and preparation space versus that cost of response. And obviously, at the same time, as much as we're preparing for and mitigating emergencies, there's always going to be some. We have to recognize that that frequency and the severity of incidents are increasing, and a lot of those drivers are around climate change, critical infrastructure interdependence that we're seeing nowadays, and the shifting demographics in Canada. So how you actually see those 4 pillars playing out when we've got an emergency? Well, you've got that level of effort that comes up over time. So we've got kind of that normal life that we're living, the life as we know it, where in EM, we're spending our time mitigating and preparing for emergencies. And then we get that interruption that happens when a hazard interacts with people. The thing about disasters is they don't really exist unless there's people involved or infrastructure. Otherwise, they just kind of happen. We hear of landslides, things like that don't include people or communities, and they happen and they're not necessarily disasters. So we go through that response phase when there are people there, so that life interruption, we go through a response. Because we're the local authority, we usually feel it first versus the province or the federal government. And we have that local authority recovery period that starts after that intense amount of effort that happens during response. And that follows through into community recovery. And that I wanted to highlight, sometimes that can last, a few months, like it can last many years, depending on the size and scale of the emergency. The way that those efforts are delivered from that timeline, it takes a multi-jurisdictional approach. So emergency management in British Columbia really is a scalable response. So I wanted to show to you how an emergency in BC starts from the bottom up. So it really gets activated from the site where that emergency is taking place. And then it starts to involve the local authority, potentially the provincial ones, sometimes federal departments. And in BC itself, it can go all the way up to the premier. That's all guided for us in BC through the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. So EDMA came into force in the fall of 2023, and that replaced the Emergency Program Act. And if you think of the act as the what, there's also these regulations that come into play with any legislation in BC, and that's the how. Right now, all we have in BC is the what. The regulations aren't yet in place, but those are anticipated in 2024. So we're hoping to get those and receive them so that we understand how the provincial government wants us to put into place the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. One of the parts that doesn't necessarily show up on this slide is an Indigenous engagement requirement, and that's a piece that the Regional District and Village of Nakusp are participating in together, where we're pooling funds with other local authorities in the Regional District to engage our First Nations on the 4 pillars of emergency management. So when it comes to a local authority and emergency management, so a local authority, regional district is a local authority, Village of Nakusp and all the other municipalities in the regional district are also local authorities, and we all have similar responsibilities that, depending on our relationship, we share those responsibilities. So the regional district has, because Nakusp is part of the regional district and its emergency management service, we share some of those responsibilities. So right out of the gate, we need to understand what our hazards are and what our risks are. So that's for both of us. We need to make some plans on how we'd respond to and mitigate those risks. We also need to understand what those plans are to ensure that we can continue to offer services to our residents if we had that interruption, so that disaster I was talking about earlier. We also have to understand that we're responsible for response. So depending on the type, size, scale of incident, might be the village of Nakusp, their response becomes potentially overwhelmed, or the incident is so much bigger than they're capable of managing on their own. That activates the broader network. So now we're into a shared response model. We also need to understand how are we going to deliver on those four emergency management pillars. So EDMA talks about something that's called a multi-jurisdictional emergency management organization. That's really different local authorities coming together and talking about how we work together. And then we need to have somebody who's appointed to be able to look after those 5 other aspects. So like I was sharing, this is how emergency management plays out between the village of Nakusp and the regional district. So it is a shared service, which means all electoral areas pay into this the regional district service called emergency management, and also 6 municipalities within the regional district. To give you a sense of the whole, Nakusp pays about 3.5% of the bigger budget, and that bigger budget is about $1 million a year to deliver on all pillars of emergency management. We have a structure within the regional district for my team. So in this particular organizational structure that you see here, my position is as EOC director or manager of community sustainability, depending if I'm in the EOC or not. And I want to draw just your attention to the 3 kinds of staff that we have. We've got core staff that are full-time. We've got response staff. So these are structures that we've put into place recently to have that just-in-time delivery or an incremental cost or incremental staffing that happens based on the incident that we're in. And I'm able to scale that structure and have it paid for by the province instead of having to pay for it through taxation or requisition when it comes to the relationship between a regional district and a municipality. And we scale that depending on the type of response. And then we've got a Fire Smart staff that for the municipalities that are part of our Fire Smart program that are also paid for, but through a specific grant. And so it's a lot of work to do. And we've split that responsibility and those roles between the village of Nakusp and the regional district into 5 different categories that are that governance piece, risk assessment, preparedness, response, and recovery that align with our requirements thus far in EDMA, so the legislation that we've been provided. There's a lot of detail here, but what's kind of key to understand is that we're in it together, and it really is dependent on the size scale of the incident in question. So if it's a small event, Village of Nakusp might be responding to it through its fire department, and the fire department's able to manage that particular event. For example, if you had a structure fire of a single family dwelling, the fire department that's their kind of bread and butter, that's their job, they know how to go out there, put the fire out. But if the folks that were in that fire needed to have emergency support services for the evening, meaning they might need a little bit of support to get a hotel room or some basic needs that they have lost in that fire, in that unfortunate event, your fire chief might call our ESS program or our duty officer program to find those supports for that person. Or if you had a large chemical spill that the fire department initially responded to, but realized it needed a little bit more support on coordinating the different agencies that were going to be coming in for a cleanup, the fire chief might ask our regional duty officer for the regional district to activate the EOC to come in and support efforts in the village. So it's a relationship that we do work together. The other part is on risk assessments, and I'm bringing it up because we're talking about doing a hazard risk and vulnerability assessment, HRVA, for the entirety of the regional district. And it's something that we're going to be developing and looking to see how we can partner with our different municipalities throughout the regional district. The one other piece that I'm going to highlight here are business continuity plans, where the village would be responsible for developing its own business continuity plans, considering they know their business best. And that's that piece that I was speaking about earlier, where we need to be able to, as local authorities, to continue to deliver these services to our residents in the event that we had some sort of disaster where, for example, the village office needed to close and move. How do we continue to serve our residents? Finally, I wanted to show a little bit about what would happen in the event that Nakusp experienced an event that was of significance and needed to activate the EOC. So this is similar to how we operated this summer with Silverton, Spokane, and New Denver. To give you a sense of it, it was in the history of the RDCK, there had never been an entire municipality that was either on evacuation alert or order. And during the summers of 2024, we unfortunately had 3 entire municipalities simultaneously either on evacuation order or on evacuation alert. So there was a lot of learning that happened last year on how that relationship needs to work in an incident. And right now we're conducting an after action review that looked internally to our EOC staff, interagency, so with other agencies that are responding. We spoke with elected officials that were in the response of the affected municipalities as well as our electoral areas. And in probably a month or so, we're going to be, actually it's less than that, but in the next week or so, there's going to be a questionnaire that's going to be going out to residents as well to hear their voices on what went well, but also where were there some hiccups on what we could be learning from and doing better into the future. So this gives you a sense of where the regional district starts to spend its time and energy when we've got an emergency that we need to respond to. And thinking about that fact at the beginning that emergency management is really around 4 pillars: that mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So it's not just that response piece, but also that big lift and big effort that we want to put into mitigation and preparedness. And that is all I have for you for today. And I would be very open to answering any questions or covering topics that I may not have heard. And I think I'm a little bit over. I'm terribly sorry, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So I do have some questions, but I'll let council go first. If anybody has anything? Council?
I've got one. Thanks for the presentation, Dan. It's Councillor / Director McLaren Co here. I was just curious because we're in budget season, if you could explain to council what exactly the ratepayers here in Nakusp are actually investing in when it comes to the emergency management service.
In terms of like specific numbers?
Well, not the numbers per se, like they're about 35,000 or so, but what does that buy us? Let's, for the lack of a better term.
Sure. So what that buys you is everything I just spoke about. So it buys you I don't like to, it's probably the wrong words. So you've got an entire team that is working nonstop for the entirety of the regional district, looking at preparedness plans, assessing risks, developing those plans that we talked about for response, for preparedness, for mitigation. We host emergency preparedness committee meetings that Village of Nakusp often goes to. Like we'll see Noel there. There are some other folks that often do come. So we also have that 24/7, 365-day a year EOC response readiness model. We have also that, so EDMA is coming into force and we have to update all our templates that we use in the event of an emergency and make sure that we're trained and prepared to deliver on all the response services that we have to do. So how to issue states of local emergency in partnership with our municipalities, how to issue evacuation orders, evacuation alerts, how to manage evacuation order areas. We are, like I mentioned, coordinating that Indigenous engagement requirement component of EDMA, which is under DRIPA and a legal requirement at this point. We're also working to coordinate the multi-jurisdictional agency planning and preparedness that is also coming through under EDMA. And we have to make sure that we're aligning our bylaws, policies, and procedures to the new regulations and doing that on behalf of everyone who's participating in the service. We're also running from a preparedness and community standpoint. There's a program called Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Program, or the NEP. And we're starting to see a lot more communities that are getting interested in how they themselves can be prepared to respond to emergencies if they needed to do that in their own community, because we'll often turn to our neighbors before we turn to an emergency program. And we're also right now working with NOL in parallel with your wildfire mitigation under the CWRPs, which is the Community Wildfire Resilience plans, to develop those this year. Nakusp and surrounding areas having its CWRP updated. That's the first pass just off the top of my head, and to give you a sense, because I mean you didn't ask for the numbers, and you're right, it's around 34,000. And to the gentleman at the beginning of the meeting who was talking about like how much it costs per residence, to give you a sense of what that looks like, if you have a $500,000 home, and I'm doing the math very quickly here, but if you have a $500,000 home in the cusp, that's about $35.50 a year per residence.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Dan. You said 2024, evacuations. So I'm not sure if you remember, but in 2021, we evacuated Folkier and Edgewood, and Folkier all came here. I'm just curious, what did you learn from that?
We learned that wildfires are hard for people, and we learned that it's really critical to when it comes to evacuations, it's critical to have places that are in proximity to where they need to be evacuating from, and to have reception centers and emergency support services in those local areas. We also learned that it is reasonable for us to have, or sorry, I'll rephrase that. It's important for us to have local knowledge and local relationships with the areas that we need to be serving. So one of the models that we recently shifted and developed is that just-in-time model that is decentralized, where we have contracts, essentially like a field operation resource worker to the emergency operations center, so to REOC, that are distributed across the region, so that we can have somebody on site. Like we have relationships with people in Edgewood now and Burton, so we can have people that are close by and that can become liaisons and activated by the EOC to go either give us an early situational report on like to be our ears and eyes on the ground would be the easy way to say it.
Thank you. Do you know who the ESS is for Nakusp?
There is a team of ESS, and it was Marilyn, and I'm unfortunately blanking on her last name. I'm so sorry. She retired this year, and she has a small team that's up there. And part of our work this year is to continue to build the ESS teams and to make them bigger, and to to have more volunteers on each of the teams. So through a recruitment campaign. And that we also continue to develop them, because they've changed a lot of ESS. The province has changed the ESS program quite a bit this year, or last year rather. So we need to make sure that people keep training on it.
Right now, we don't have leading the ESS in Nakusp right now. If something happened.
I'm sorry, you cut out just at the wrong time. Can you repeat that, please?
If I heard you right, since Marilyn is retired, do you have someone in place right now if there was an emergency for ESS?
We do, and I do not know all their names, unfortunately. I do have, and I could get that back to you after I speak with my emergency program coordinator that's in charge of that program. But there are ESS that are in Nakusp, and more so, we have the way that we run our ESS in the regional district is that emergency support services can move and support each other throughout the regional district. So it's not just geographically specific, but we try to spread them out as much as possible. So they do support each other as one program. So if, for example, throughout the summer last year, where we had so many activations, so many evacuation orders, that we needed to pull ESS people from across the regional district as well as BC and other regional districts that are neighboring to us. So they don't have to be specific to where they're located, and we're able to move them and bring them in to support whatever the need is.
Are they volunteers or is there some funding for them?
They are 100% volunteer, and that is a provincial program that we deliver.
Thank you. And you're talking about liaison and funding and on the ground in Edgewood, Fauquier, Burton, Nakusp. So previously, our fire chief, I think back a few years back, was getting almost 2 or 3 days a week paid from RDCK from emergency services. And then it went down to 2, then this, I think 1 year left, you moved up down to 1. So I'm trying to figure out why everything is moving to Nelson, where we've got the knowledge here and the contractors, and they all know everything about this area. What I'm worried about, if everything is taken, we got to phone Nelson, they don't know the area. We have contractors, we have probably the best skilled people in this community that can act at any time. And if we have to call you, I'm kind of worried that there's going to be a long delays, and to try to mobilize what you're trying to do there when we can do it here. I hope we don't lose any funding.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. I can't speak historically. I knew Terry. I was a firefighter for 10 years, so I knew Chief Warren for a long time, and I used to be the chair of the Central Kootenay Regional Fire Chiefs Association, so I had a good relationship with Terry. I can't speak to the previous years. I've only been in this position for a year and 3/4, more or less. So I would say that we're not shifting. That while it might look like everything is moving to Nelson, we're actually trying to decentralize out of Nelson, but it's not by having specific EPCs in different geographies. So for example, if you think of us, or if you think of emergency management as a regional service, it used to be that every other regional, every electoral area and every municipality was paying for a portion of the EPC that was sitting in Nakusp. And that was the part that we were trying to bring a higher level of equity and of sharing to the service by decentralizing and moving that to a just-in-time model that was cost recoverable by the province as opposed to having to be paid for through taxation. And that's how we've shifted to that just-in-time model where we have people that are decentralized, or resources that are decentralized, ready to be activated, if you can call it that way. And those people are people that understand and know the area. For example, Noel would be, your EPC would be someone that we would reach out to. And there's going to be some training because it's a new model this year. So there would be some training that's going to come with it for each of those people. So we're expecting actually not only, like, I think it's actually going to be a better level of service than we used to have, because the idea of having just one person who's available maybe assumes that they're going to be, one, available, two, that they're going to be in the location that we need them to be. And that's not, there isn't enough redundancy in that type of system to make sure that we can have that person when we need them. So that's why we moved away from that decentralized, or moved to a decentralized model. And if you feel that you're getting less service, if ever that starts to happen, I'm a phone call away. I'd love to better understand what you might need more from us.
That was mostly my question, just that we have reassurance, Stan, that with the just-in-time model over having a dedicated person, that the service delivery would remain at least stable to what it is right now. But no, I appreciate your explanation there. Thank you.
Yeah, I would hate to, it's just the experience and everything else here. We are quite a ways from Nelson. We're not at Slocan. We're not in Castlegar. We're a long ways away. And I service an enormous area all the way to Trout Lake, all the way up to under the Monashee. So we're a long ways away. Disadvantaged. I would like to see some help funding here because we have the professionals here. I would like, hate to lose what we have now.
Yeah, I could appreciate that. Yeah.
And actually, if there's, I can let someone speak from the, yes, go ahead and state who you are.
My name is Carolina, and I agree with the mayor. Because after you finish going through all your chains of command, all of a sudden your fire is out of control. Because, and that's happened in Edgewood, where people here who are the loggers, who have fire training, who know the terrain, who know what they're doing, are not able to go out until the government goes through all these little phases and tells them 3 days later, okay, go fight the fire. Well, now it's out of control. Where we have the people right here that could go out right now and fight it.
Did you hear that, Dan?
I did. Thank you. Sorry.
The other thing, like with this whole fire mitigation, I've seen the fire mitigation that's been done around town. And what it does is it makes the trees so far apart that you get one strong wind and it blows everything down. And now you've got, the whole ground is covered with like fire starting material. So how does that help? And all I heard through your whole presentation is we have this group being paid by taxpayer dollars doing this, and this group over here being paid by taxpayer dollars doing that. And we still have fires that are out of control. Right? So I have an issue with that.
Thank you. You writing that down, Dan?
Yep, I got it. Thank you. Thank you through the chair. I appreciate the question. I think I'll take the opportunity of the question just to clarify jurisdictional responsibility. And so while so what I heard in the question was there's concerns in how we're fighting our wildfires. And there's concerns that we're not hitting them hard enough and fast enough, and that community would be able to do that if the government got out of the way. Possibly. And all I can say is that RDCK and Nakusp and Village of Nakusp don't have the jurisdictional responsibility for wildfire fighting. That lands outside of fire protection areas. I'll add that. That lands with BC Wildfire. And BC Wildfire is a provincial, they're in the Ministry of Forests. So those are that's the ministry that would be responsible for that wildfire fighting. So as much as I'd like to have influence on how they go about fighting fires, that's not, I don't really get a say in that. In terms of mitigation, I'm not familiar with the specifics of how what kind of fuel modifications or fuel mitigation has been done around Nakusp, but it's true. There are some practices that are leaving trees susceptible to windstorms, and that is another hazard. In the community wildfire resiliency plans, that is something that they try to address, and they try to make sure that they're leaving a forest that isn't, well, one that looks okay, but that's also serving that purpose of being that fire break to slow fire down if ever it was coming towards the village. I don't know if that answers your question. I know there was a bit of a comment in there too, so but I heard it.
You help with the jurisdictions, which help. Jim? Want to speak up and tell us your name?
Jim Fenton, I'm curious, you mentioned which Indigenous group in our electoral district will you be consulting?
Hello? I think it's
Hey Dan, this is Valley Voice.
hi.
I'm in New Denver. We just lost power here. There's
Oh,
like
no.
there's like I can see the power station thing that's here and it was
Yeah.
doing some kind of weird flickering. So I think maybe the village lost in Nakusp lost power too. So
They must have. It'll take them a minute before the
yeah, I
generators
think
kick
it
up.
might actually be a while.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
But
I might
I
get
don't know
another
for
phone
sure.
call.
So
Oh, that's too bad. I appreciate it though for the heads up. Maybe I'll stick around just in case something comes back.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Um, so my name is Amy Zobel, and I'm a resident just outside of Nakusp. And I just had a quick question. I was wondering if there's any way to distribute some information on how one can volunteer to assist with the
ESS.
ESS program. Since it is volunteer based, I've never really heard of being able to volunteer, and I'm wondering where one can find that info.
100%. Do you have access to the chat?
I do, yes.
Okay, let me throw it into there. If you give me 1 second, let's see. This is a long version, but it's that'll give you a. Do you see that link that I just threw into the chat?
Yes, I do.
So if you visit that, it'll give you a bit of information on how slash what ESS is, and it'll show you an apply here where you can express interest, and then somebody will reach out to you to get you kind of into the process or answer any questions that you have. And we're going to be doing a recruitment campaign specifically in the Cusp area and actually all around the Slocan and throughout the regional district. So that's going to be going out across social media and into your, like, I'm going to try to find the right local papers to do that in, but that'll be coming out soon too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your interest. We had to talk about emergency management and for there to be a big power failure. We should have been talking about winning the lottery or something like that. Doesn't sound, oh. It was arcing. It doesn't sound like they're gonna continue, so I'm gonna pop off. They're gonna send me questions at another time, so have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Dan.